You ever have one of those nights where everything feels quiet, like the world itself is taking a deep breath? That's how it feels standing here, or at least imagining standing here, under the Egyptian night sky. The air is cool, dry, and still, and in the distance, three massive silhouettes rise from the desert floor. The Pyramids of Giza. They don't move. They don't shimmer. They don't do anything dramatic. And yet, you can't help but feel they're alive. Like they're holding on to a secret that nobody's ever managed to pry loose. It's hard to believe these things were built over 4,000 years ago. At least, that's what we've been told. The Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafre, and the Pyramid of Menkaure, three ancient triangles pointing stubbornly at the stars. But the truth is, the more you learn about them, the stranger they get. I mean, think about it. We can land rovers on Mars, edit genes, and even make cheese out of cashew nuts. Yet we still don't fully understand how these enormous piles of stone were made. Over 2 million blocks, each weighing as much as an elephant, stacked so perfectly that a piece of paper can barely fit between them. Now, maybe you've heard the mainstream version, the one where thousands of workers spent decades carving, hauling, and stacking under the orders of Pharaoh Khufu. A monument to power, built by sheer human grit. And yeah, that's probably true. But what if there's more to the story? What if the pyramids are older than we think? What if they're survivors of a forgotten world? A world that lived, thrived, and then vanished during something called the Younger Dryas cataclysm. That name sounds like a heavy metal band, but it's actually one of the strangest chapters in Earth's history. About 12,800 years ago, something happened, something big. The climate suddenly flipped from warm to freezing almost overnight. Glaciers that were melting began to grow again. Animals died out in waves. Sea levels dropped. It was chaos. Scientists are still arguing about what caused it. Some say it was a massive comet that hit the ice sheets. Others think it was volcanic activity or a disruption in ocean currents. Whatever it was, it nearly wiped out humanity's progress. But here's the weird part. After this chaos ended, civilizations started popping up fast. Agriculture, cities, writing, and architecture, all within a few thousand years. It's like humans went from campfire and stone tools to, hey, let's build a pyramid taller than the Statue of Liberty in record time. And that's where the mystery deepens. Some researchers, the controversial ones, the rebels of archaeology, believe the pyramids might have roots in this lost pre-cataclysmic age. A civilization older than Egypt, one that had the knowledge to track the stars, cut stone with surgical precision, and build monuments that could outlast ice ages. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like ancient aliens, right? Don't worry, we're not going there. Well, not yet anyway. But seriously, even without extraterrestrials, the idea is wild enough. Imagine a society so advanced that when the world fell apart, when floods, fires, and freezing temperatures wiped the slate clean, a few survivors held onto their knowledge, wandering the earth like living libraries. And maybe, just maybe, when the Nile Valley became fertile again, their descendants decided to start over. So tonight, as we drift into this story, I want you to picture it. The desert, endless and golden by day, silver and silent by night. The stars above aren't just random points of light. They're a map, a memory of what once was. The pyramids stand like bookmarks in time, marking the chapters of a story we've barely begun to read. I sometimes imagine what it would have felt like to walk here thousands of years ago. Maybe you'd hear the distant hammering of stone, or the soft chanting of workers at sunrise. Maybe you'd smell the smoke of fires and the sharp tang of limestone dust in the air. Or maybe, if you were quiet enough, you'd hear nothing but the whisper of wind slipping through ancient corridors, carrying voices from the past. There's something comforting about that idea, isn't there? That even in the middle of a desert, surrounded by silence, there are still stories echoing through time. And if these pyramids could talk, what would they say? Would they tell us about the pharaohs, proud and golden, who demanded monuments to their own glory? Or would they tell us something older, something about a world that ended in fire and ice, a world whose people refused to vanish? The funny thing is, the pyramids don't care what we believe. They just stand there watching centuries roll by. Empires have risen and fallen at their feet. Wars, famines, revolutions, the pyramids have seen them all and stayed perfectly still. They've watched us change, watched us build airplanes, cell phones, and TikTok dances, and through it all, they just keep staring at the horizon like stoic grandparents who've seen too much to be impressed anymore. There's a kind of peace in that, I think. The idea that even when everything around you changes, even when whole civilizations come and go, something can remain. That's why this story matters. The pyramids aren't just old buildings. They're symbols of survival. They're proof that even after the earth itself turned hostile, after ice swallowed continents and fire scorched the skies, humanity found a way to rise again. As I stand in this imagined desert, the sand cool beneath my feet, the stars endless above, I feel small, but not in a bad way. More like grateful. Grateful that somewhere deep in our past, people looked up at these same stars and decided to leave something behind that would outlast them. Something that would whisper through the ages. We were here. We remembered. And maybe that's the secret of the pyramids. Not hidden chambers or alien tech, but endurance. The human kind. The kind that builds, even when everything seems lost. So, as the night settles over Giza and the desert wind hums like a lullaby, let's begin our journey. Together, we'll peel back the layers of time, the myths, the science, the mysteries, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get a little closer to understanding what the sands have been whispering all along. The world was different once. Long before the pyramids, before writing or kings, before Egypt had even drawn its first breath. The earth was wild, fresh, and alive in ways we can only imagine. Great green plains stretched across the Sahara. Rivers carved paths through valleys that are now dry as bone. The air was clean, heavy with rain, and the stars seemed to hang lower in the sky, as if watching, waiting, for what humans might become. It's strange to think that there was a time before time. A time when people didn't count the years or name the months. They followed the rhythm of the earth itself. The flood, the sun, the stars. Each sunrise was enough. Each storm was a message. The planet spoke and our ancestors listened. They built nothing that we can see now. Their homes were made of mud, wood, and reeds, materials the desert swallowed long ago. Yet, something of them remains, hidden beneath layers of sand and memory. Every once in a while, archaeologists stumble on a tool, a bone, or a carving, and the silence of 10,000 years suddenly cracks open. But there's another idea, one that stirs both excitement and debate. What if these ancient people were not as primitive as we assume? What if, before the great freeze of the Younger Dryas, there was a civilization far older and far more advanced than history dares to remember? Sounds like fantasy, but pause for a second. Nearly every culture tells stories of a golden age that came before the darkness. The Greeks spoke of Atlantis, a mighty empire swallowed by the sea. The Sumerians wrote of kings who ruled for thousands of years before a great flood. Even the Egyptians themselves told of Zep-Tepi, the first time, when gods and humans shared the earth in harmony. Maybe these stories are just myths, Or maybe, like old photographs fading with age, their memories, distorted but real. Geologists now know that around 12,000 years ago, the world changed violently. Ice sheets collapsed, oceans rose, whole continents were reshaped. If a civilization had existed before then, its cities would have been erased, buried beneath the sea or scattered as rubble. No wonder we find so little evidence. Time is a ruthless editor. Still, a few clues whisper from the edges. Ancient maps, like the Pyramids map, show coastlines of Antarctica without ice, something supposedly impossible for the people of the 1500s to know. Strange stone sites, like Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, appear suddenly in the archaeological record, fully formed and impossibly precise, as if the builders had inherited skills rather than learned them slowly. Göbekli Tepe, built more than 11,000 years ago, seems to rise right out of the ashes of the Younger Dryas. Perfectly carved pillars covered in animal symbols, arranged with mathematical accuracy. It's as though someone woke up after the cataclysm and said, "All right, let's start over. But this time, let's build in stone so it lasts." That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Because a few thousand years later, along the banks of a great African river, another people would do the same. They'd build monuments meant to defy time itself. Maybe that impulse to build, to remember, is something we've always carried deep inside. It's comforting, really, the idea that humans have always tried to leave something behind. Whether it's a carving, a pyramid, or just a story told beside a fire. We've always wanted to be remembered. But if there truly was a lost civilization, one wiped out by the Younger Dryas, what would they have been like? Maybe they weren't flying spaceships or using lasers to cut stone. Maybe they were simply humans who had reached a higher understanding of the natural world. People who could read the stars, predict the floods, and build with an elegance we've forgotten. Knowledge doesn't always mean machines and metal. Sometimes it's quiet wisdom, knowing when to plant, when to move, when to listen. The kind of knowledge that vanishes easily when the world turns upside down. And when it did, when that great freeze ended, survivors must have scattered across the globe. Some to the highlands, some along rivers, some down to the fertile valley that would one day be called Egypt. They carried stories, memories, and fragments of understanding. Maybe they taught the next generation how to measure the heavens. Maybe they passed down the dream of eternal stone. Generations later, when Egyptians looked up at the stars and spoke of Zep-Tepi, the time when the gods ruled, they might have been speaking about those ancient survivors. Their memory became divine. Their science became myth. Because when you don't have words for lost civilization, you call them gods. The sand buries evidence, but it can't silence memory. Even now, as scientists uncover ancient settlements under deserts and seas, the old question stirs again. How much of our story is missing? It's easy to laugh at the idea of forgotten advanced cultures. We picture Atlantis as people in shiny armor or glowing crystals. But maybe the truth is quieter. Maybe the advanced part wasn't about technology, it was about harmony. About living with the earth instead of fighting it. That kind of civilization could vanish without leaving skyscrapers or steel. But maybe they left something else behind. An idea, a seed, a dream that one day inspired others to build the greatest monuments ever made. The pyramids might be that dream made real. Ancient echoes rising from the sands. A continuation of something that started long before pharaohs wore crowns. It's strange, isn't it? We walk through history like tourists, believing we're at the beginning of the story, when maybe we're just in the middle of a much older one. The night still hums with those echoes. The wind carries them across the dunes, soft and patient. It tells of a time before kings, before borders, before names, when humans looked up at the stars and tried to make sense of it all. Maybe that's the real secret. Our ancestors weren't so different from us. They loved, they feared, they dreamed. And when the world ended, they began again. Somewhere deep beneath the desert, under layers of sand and silence, their memory still sleeps. And one day, maybe we'll remember them. But for now, we move forward, to the land that rose from the floodwaters, the river that carried life back to the world, and the people who would turn that memory into a kingdom. The Nile waits. The Nile is not just a river. It is a heartbeat that has been pulsing through the veins of Africa for millions of years. Long before there were temples or pharaohs or golden crowns, there was water. Cool, rich, unstoppable water, carving its way through the desert. In a world that had been frozen, burned, and drowned, the Nile was life itself. When the ice finally retreated after the Younger Dryas, the world began to breathe again. The great floods that had once swallowed lands now brought renewal. Seeds took root in the fertile black soil along the riverbanks, and people, exhausted wanderers who had survived the chaos, found their refuge here. They followed the water, built small camps along its edge, and watched it rise and fall with a rhythm that felt like a promise. The Nile didn't just feed the land. It fed the imagination. Every year, when the waters swelled and spread across the plains, it was like the earth itself was reborn. To those early settlers, it must have felt like magic. One season, the land was dry and cracked. The next, it shimmered with life. Fields of barley, papyrus, and wildflowers stretching as far as the eye could see. It wasn't long before the people began to understand the pattern. The river gives and it takes. It destroys and it renews. From that understanding came one of the most powerful ideas in all of human history, the idea of balance, of order, of ma'at. The Nile was their first teacher, and its lesson was simple. Everything in life depends on rhythm. As centuries passed, those small river camps became villages, and the villages became towns. People learned to shape mud into bricks, to carve boats from wood, to tame the floods with simple canals. They built shrines to thank the river and the sky. They drew symbols of the things they feared and loved most: the sun, the stars, the crocodile, the heron. Somewhere along the line, someone, perhaps by accident, discovered that the river's flooding was connected to the stars above. When the bright star Sirius appeared in the dawn sky, it meant the waters were coming. That moment, that tiny discovery, turned survival into science. The first calendar was born. Imagine the wonder of it. For the first time, humans could predict time itself. They could prepare, plan, and plant with confidence. That's when the Nile stopped being just a river. It became destiny. And yet, beneath that calm progress, there was memory, an echo of the old catastrophe. The stories of the world's destruction, passed down through generations, were still alive. The elders spoke of the age before the flood, of the gods who once walked with humans, of the knowledge that had been lost. Maybe it was that memory that drove them to build bigger, stronger, more permanent things. The first temples rose, not yet the grand stone sanctuaries we imagine, but simple structures made of mud and reeds. They weren't built for power or wealth, but for connection. To the sky, to the earth, to the past. These temples were quiet places. A priest might stand barefoot on cool clay, whispering prayers to the rising sun. A farmer might leave an offering, a bowl of grain, a few flowers, to thank the river for another season of life. There were no grand ceremonies, no gold, no armies. Just gratitude and awe. And slowly, those humble rituals became the foundation of something extraordinary. Each year, people added more. A wall here, a pillar there, a stone that could not be washed away. The idea was simple: if everything else can vanish, then let something remain. Out of this mindset came the first great builders, the ancestors of the pyramid architects. They looked at the stars, at the river, at the endless desert, and they began to dream in stone. The dream was not about power. It was about remembrance. By then, Egypt had become a miracle of stability. While other regions struggled with droughts and storms, the Nile kept its rhythm. The people learned to trust it. They began to see themselves as part of something eternal. Each generation added its mark to the land, building not for themselves but for those who would come after. It's easy to imagine those early mornings. Fishermen casting nets in the mist, children running barefoot through the fields, the smell of wet earth and smoke in the air. Life was hard, yes, but it was also full of wonder. Every sunrise felt like proof that the world had survived. Somewhere in those centuries of calm, the first kings appeared. They didn't rule through fear or armies at first, but through wisdom, the ability to speak for the gods and to keep the balance. They were seen not as masters, but as caretakers of the divine order that the Nile had taught them. And so, from the mud and water of a reborn earth, a civilization began to rise. A civilization that would outlast empires, reshape history, and leave behind mysteries so deep that we still whisper about them thousands of years later. But every beginning has its architects, and Egypt's would become legends. Among them was a man whose name still echoes through time. Imhotep, the first great builder, the mind who dared to dream higher than anyone before him. He would take the lessons of the river and turn them into monuments that reached for the heavens. He would show the world that stone could breathe, that silence could speak, that a building could be a prayer made permanent. And so, as the Nile continued to flow, Egypt's people began to carve their memory into eternity. Each block, each wall, each rising step was a message to the future. We were here. We endured. We remembered. The river had given them life. Now, through their hands, they would give it form. And somewhere in the distance, under the same sun, the sands were waiting for their next secret to be revealed. Imhotep. His name has drifted through more than 4,000 years, softened by time, wrapped in myth, but still shining like gold dust in sunlight. The ancient Egyptians called him the Wise One, the Architect, the Physician, the Magician. But long before people whispered his name in temples, he was simply a man who looked at a block of stone and saw a staircase to the heavens. By the time Imhotep walked the earth, Egypt was finding its rhythm. The Nile had shaped its people into master planners and careful dreamers. Villages had grown into cities. Kings had become gods on earth. And with the dawn of the Old Kingdom came an idea that would change the world forever. If the gods are eternal, shouldn't the memory of kings be eternal too? That thought became the seed of the first pyramid. Started humbly, as most great things do. Before pyramids, pharaohs were buried in simple rectangular tombs called mastabas, flat, low structures made of mud brick. They were practical, functional, and, let's be honest, not particularly impressive. But Imhotep looked at one and thought, we can do better. So he stacked one mastaba on top of another, and then another, each smaller than the last, forming the world's first step pyramid. It rose above the sands of Saqqara, reaching toward the sky like a giant staircase. When it was finished, people must have stared in awe. Nothing like it had ever existed. That moment was a turning point. Stone had never been used like this before, not just as shelter but as a statement, said, "We are more than dust. We can reach the heavens." Imagine the scene. Workers hauling limestone blocks under the burning sun, ropes creaking, voices calling in rhythm. The scent of dust and sweat fills the air. Nearby, priests chant prayers to Ra, their voices low and steady, asking for balance between effort and blessing. There's no machinery, no cranes, just human hands, patience, and a sense of purpose that seems almost impossible to modern minds. Imhotep's design didn't just build a tomb. It built an idea. He showed that stone could carry meaning, that architecture could be more than walls, it could be language. Every block placed, every line drawn was a sentence written to the gods. And soon others wanted to speak that language too. Over the generations, new builders refined Imhotep's dream. The step pyramid became smooth, the angles sharper, the scale grander. With each new pharaoh came a new challenge, a new ambition. The pyramid of Sneferu at Dashur bent halfway up, its sides changing angle mid-rise. A mistake, maybe, or maybe a lesson in humility. Even geniuses need practice. Then came the Great Pyramid of Giza, perfection in stone, aligned to true north with a precision we still can't fully explain. Its base nearly level to within fractions of an inch. It wasn't just a tomb, it was a cosmic compass, a statement written for eternity. To stand before it is to feel both small and infinite. The sheer scale doesn't make sense. Over 2 million blocks, some weighing as much as 30 tons, fitted together so tightly you can't slide a knife blade between them. And yet, for all its power, there's grace in its design. Feels calm, balanced, almost alive. No one truly knows how they built it. Theories float around like sand in the wind. Ramps, levers, water shafts, pulleys. Maybe they used a combination of all of them. Maybe there was another secret, one we've simply forgotten. But perhaps the real question isn't how, but why. The ancient Egyptians believed that death wasn't an ending. It was a journey. The pyramid was not just a grave. It was a portal, a bridge between worlds. Its angles reached upward, guiding the pharaoh's soul toward the stars. The chambers inside were filled with spells, food, and symbols. Everything the king might need for his eternal voyage. Still, you can't help but wonder if there was more to it. Maybe those early builders weren't just thinking of one man's afterlife. Maybe they were echoing something older, something passed down from a time before Egypt itself. A memory of a civilization that had once faced destruction and vowed to build something that would never die again. That idea hums quietly in the stones, if you let yourself listen. The precision, the geometry, the alignment to the stars, all of it feels like more than just architecture. It feels like remembrance. And perhaps that's the greatest mystery of all. Because every time we think we've figured it out, the pyramids just stand there, unbothered, smiling in the sun, as if to say, "You're not quite ready yet." They don't shout their secrets. They whisper them. You can almost hear it in the wind that moves through their corridors, in the echo of footsteps against ancient walls. Maybe Imhotep and his successors weren't trying to impress the gods at all. Maybe they were trying to preserve something, to carry forward a message carved in stone, one that could survive fire, flood, and time itself. Whatever their true purpose, those first architects of stone achieved something no one else ever has. They built silence that speaks. And as the sun sets over the Giza plateau, the golden light slides across the limestone, and for a moment, the pyramids seem to glow from within, like memories waking up for the night. Tomorrow we'll step closer still into the Great Pyramid itself, to wonder at its impossible perfection, and to ask the question that has haunted humanity for centuries. How could ancient hands, without machines or modern tools, create something that might still outlast the stars? They called it Ake Khufu, the horizon of Khufu, the Great Pyramid, a mountain of stone built not by nature but by human hands. It rises from the desert with such quiet confidence that even after thousands of years, it still feels like it's waiting for someone to ask the right question. How did they build it? That's the question that has followed it through time, whispered by explorers, shouted by skeptics, and pondered by anyone who's ever stood in its shadow. Because when you see it in person, when you feel the heat of the stone beneath your fingers, the sheer scale almost breaks your sense of logic. The base stretches wider than 9 football fields. Each side once gleamed with polished white limestone so bright it could have been seen from miles away, shining like a star fallen to earth. At its heart are millions of massive blocks, some heavier than a fully grown elephant, each cut, moved, and placed with precision so perfect that the gaps between them are thinner than a credit card. And they did this 4,500 years ago, or maybe, just maybe, even longer ago than that. The official story is simple. Teams of skilled workers, organized under Pharaoh Khufu during Egypt's 4th dynasty, labored for decades using copper chisels, wooden sledges, and ramps of mud brick and limestone. The pyramid, according to this version, was a royal tomb, a monument to the god-king's power and his eternal journey to the afterlife. But stand there at sunset, with the wind sweeping across the plateau, and the air feels heavier. The stones hum with a quiet intelligence, as if they know more than they should. Could a civilization that early, armed only with basic tools, really have built something so perfect that we still can't fully replicate it today? That's where the mystery begins to unfold. No one has ever found a single written plan, blueprint, or diagram explaining how it was done. No ancient texts describe the exact methods. There are no records of ramps long enough or strong enough to haul blocks that size up that high. Archaeologists have found fragments of ramps and sledges, yes, but the evidence feels like scattered puzzle pieces missing their center. Some modern engineers argue that even with today's technology, building something with that level of alignment and accuracy would be a massive challenge. The pyramid's corners are aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west, within a fraction of a degree. Its base is so level that it varies less than an inch over its entire 13-acre footprint. These aren't the marks of guesswork. They're the signs of minds that measured with the sky itself. Maybe that's where the real secret lies, in the heavens. The builders of Giza weren't just stacking stones. They were aligning their world with the cosmos. The sides of the pyramid mirror the rays of the setting and rising sun. The shafts inside the king's chamber point toward the stars, one toward Orion's belt, the other toward Sirius. The structure itself seems to hum with astronomical intent, as if it was part of a cosmic equation we've only begun to understand. Still, theories multiply like desert mirages. Some say massive straight ramps were used and later dismantled. Others imagine spiraling ramps hugging the pyramid's sides. There are even ideas of water-lubricated tracks, counterweight systems, and pulleys hidden within the pyramid's core. And then there are those who believe the builders possessed knowledge lost to time, advanced geometry, acoustic technology, maybe even something far stranger. But whatever theory you prefer, one thing is certain. This wasn't just construction. It was choreography. Thousands of people moving in rhythm, guided by mathematics, faith, and something close to obsession. You can almost picture it. The morning sun blazing on the horizon, workers singing as they drag sledges across wet sand, priests marking the rising of Sirius in the sky, and architects with reed pens and steady hands sketching lines that would shape eternity. And the sound. Imagine that sound. The echo of chisels striking stone, the thud of blocks settling into place, the murmur of voices carried by the wind, a human heartbeat amplified by the desert. For all the grandeur, it's easy to forget how human it really was. These weren't faceless slaves, as old myths claim. Most were skilled workers, well-fed, housed nearby, and proud of their labor. They left behind graffiti, little jokes carved into hidden blocks. Teams had names like the Drunkards of Menkor and the Friends of Khufu. Even in eternity's shadow, people had humor. Still, there's something else about the Great Pyramid that doesn't quite fit. It feels deliberate in ways that go beyond human ego. The placement, the angles, the proportions, they all hint at knowledge that reaches beyond simple trial and error. Some believe it encodes the dimensions of the Earth itself. Others think it was designed to mimic the shape of energy, a kind of ancient spiritual technology, a bridge between matter and spirit. Whether or not that's true, the feeling it gives you is undeniable. The closer you stand, the quieter the world becomes. The air feels different, as if the pyramid is breathing, its massive stones soaking in the heat of the day and exhaling it at night. Maybe that's why it still draws us in, because somewhere deep down we recognize it as more than stone. It's a message from our ancestors, carved in geometry instead of words. A statement that says, "We understood the sky, we understood the earth, and we understood that everything is connected." As the sun dips below the horizon, the pyramid turns gold, then crimson, then gray. The wind settles, the desert cools, and there it stands, silent, impossible, eternal. The horizon of Khufu, the Great Pyramid, perhaps not just a tomb but a question made solid. And as night falls over Giza, the stars begin to appear. The same stars the builders watched thousands of years ago, the same ones that guided their hands and shaped their dreams. It's hard not to wonder if they're still watching now. The desert is quiet now. The day's heat has slipped away, and the sky above the pyramids is this deep, dark velvet, scattered with stars, like someone spilled glitter across the universe. The Great Pyramid just sits there, calm, ancient, watching the sky like it's waiting for something. And maybe it was, because the people who built it or inherited it, depending on who you ask, they didn't just build for the ground. They were looking up, at the stars, at Orion, Sirius, the Milky Way, that big cosmic ocean above. You see, the ancient Egyptians weren't just obsessed with the sun and the Nile, they were stargazers too. And not in the make-a-wish on a shooting star kind of way. More like we're mapping the heavens because the afterlife might depend on it kind of way. Yeah, it was that serious. Let's rewind to ancient times. No phones, no traffic, no light pollution. Just people lying on rooftops or sitting in temple courtyards, looking up at the night sky, which, by the way, probably looked incredible. Like Ultra HD Cosmic IMAX. Now, imagine watching those stars every night for your whole life. Your dad did it. Your granddad. His granddad. Everyone for generations. You start to notice patterns. You start to wonder what they mean. And for the Egyptians, the sky wasn't just pretty. It was a map. A spiritual map. The stars told stories, marked time, guided rituals. They believed when you died, your soul didn't just float off to nowhere. It went on a journey, through the stars, to join the gods, and they had favorite stars too. Let's talk about a couple of those. First up, Orion's Belt. Those three stars in a row that most of us can spot even if we don't know a thing about constellations. To the Egyptians, Orion was associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. You know, the one who got chopped into pieces, reassembled by his wife, and then became ruler of the dead. Total legend. Now here's the cool part, the three pyramids of Giza, they line up in a way that mirrors Orion's belt. Two big ones in a line and a slightly smaller one offset to the side, just like the stars. Coincidence? Maybe. But also, maybe not. Some researchers think this alignment was on purpose, like the builders wanted the pyramids to reflect the heavens. A kind of as above, so below situation. Earth mimicking sky, life mimicking the afterlife, which honestly is pretty poetic. Next up, Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. The Egyptians called it Sopdet, and they were big fans. Why? Because every year, just before the Nile flooded, Sirius would rise in the dawn sky. Right on cue, like a cosmic alarm clock. That flood was everything. It brought the water and nutrients that made farming possible in a desert. So Sirius wasn't just a pretty dot in the sky. It was basically the star of survival. It even helped shape their calendar. The Egyptian New Year started with the heliacal rising of Sirius. That first moment it popped up above the horizon before sunrise. Sirius rising equals the rivers coming equals time to party. And also dig irrigation trenches. And then there's the Milky Way. You've probably seen it in photos, that milky streak across the night sky. In Egypt, it was seen as a kind of celestial Nile. One river on earth. One in the heavens. Some believed it was the path souls traveled after death. Others thought it was the milk of the cow goddess Hathor. Yeah, ancient myth was wild like that. Either way, it was sacred. Watching the Milky Way was like peeking into the divine realm. Like the gods had left a trail of breadcrumbs in the sky. So back to the pyramids. Their sides are aligned almost perfectly to true north. Like within a fraction of a degree. And remember, no compasses back then. No GPS. Just stars, string, and math. How did they do it? One theory is they used the stars to find north. Maybe by watching the movement of circumpolar stars, the ones that never set, like the Big Dipper and friends, and plotting their paths until they crossed. That crossing point? Boom. True north. Some think they tracked two stars in opposite directions and measured their midpoint. Simple, kind of, but genius. This kind of precision wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. The pyramids weren't just monuments, they were part of a bigger picture, like giant sundials and star calendars, woven into the landscape. Here's where it gets a little dreamy. According to Egyptian belief, when a pharaoh died, he didn't just chill in a tomb forever. His soul, or Ka, had places to go. Through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Past trials, gods, gates, and stars. The pyramids were possibly built as launch pads for that journey. Some shafts inside the Great Pyramid point toward stars like Orion and Sirius. Not random, not decorative. Intentional stargazing tunnels for the soul. Imagine that you die, and your final trip is through a dark tunnel, heading straight toward Osiris in the sky. Creepy? A little. Majestic? Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. But not just the kind who tracked eclipses or plotted constellations. They were philosopher-astronomers, stargazers with purpose. The sky wasn't just science, it was sacred. It was story. It was soul. They watched the stars not just to understand the heavens, but to understand themselves. And somehow, thousands of years later, we're still doing the same. Cue music fading softer. Desert wind whispering again. The pyramids sit quietly beneath the stars, just like they always have. Just watching, just waiting, maybe for the next soul to make the journey home. Or maybe just enjoying the view. The stars are still out, twinkling softly above the desert. But tonight, let's shift our gaze just a little. Not to the pyramids or the gods, but to something bigger, something older, something that might have changed the course of human history. Before we even got started, this chapter's about the Younger Dryas. Sounds like a sci-fi movie title, right? Like some ancient alien detective with ice powers. But nope, the Younger Dryas was very real. And very, very cold. So here's the deal. About 12,800 years ago, Earth was coming out of the last ice age. Things were warming up, glaciers were melting, mammoths were minding their business, and humans were figuring out how to farm without freezing. And then, bam, just as the planet was finally getting cozy, everything snapped back to winter. Almost overnight, temperatures dropped, ice surged back in. It was like someone hit Earth's reset button. This icy hiccup lasted around 1,200 years. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas. Sounds fancy, but it basically means the second cold snap named after a flower. True story, it's named after a wildflower that grows in cold climates. Science gets poetic sometimes. Now, why did this happen? Good question. And it's still kind of a mystery. Some scientists say a massive burst of fresh water from melting glaciers poured into the North Atlantic. That messed with ocean currents, kind of like pulling the plug on Earth's central heating system. But there's another theory, a spicier one that involves fire from the sky. Enter the comet hypothesis. Some researchers believe that a comet or fragments of a comet hit Earth around 12,800 years ago. The impact would have caused massive fires, shock waves, and atmospheric chaos. Kind of like Earth getting punched in the face with a frozen space rock. There's even some evidence. Layers of microscopic diamonds, spherules, and black mats found at sites across North America and parts of Europe. All of them dated to, you guessed it, around 12,800 years ago. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe this was the big event. The one that reset human civilization. Let's think about that for a second. Imagine you're part of a thriving early society. You've got farming, maybe some temples, maybe even books or something like books made of bark or clay. Life's good. And then suddenly, fire rains from the sky. The sky turns dark. Crops die. Animals vanish. Whole landscapes change. Floods follow. Then ice. Everything gone. Except a few survivors. Scattered. Struggling. Remembering things in stories and songs. Sounds like mythology, right? But maybe mythology is memory wearing a mask. Now fast forward a few thousand years. The Earth warms back up. People rebuild. They start telling stories. Stories of gods, floods, lost cities, and golden ages. In Mesopotamia, it's the Epic of Gilgamesh. In India, the Mahabharata. In Greece, it's Atlantis. And in Egypt, it's Zep-Tepi the first time. A time when gods ruled. A time before the flood. It's almost like cultures all over the world were trying to say the same thing in different ways. There was something before us, and it was lost. Could the pyramids be part of that memory? Egypt has its own flood stories, though they're not quite as dramatic as the ones in other places. Instead of one big flood, their mythology talks about cycles. Rebirth. The Nile flooding every year, not as destruction, but as renewal. Life rising from chaos. But there's one legend that stands out. It's the tale of the Benben, the first mound to rise from the waters of chaos. It became the foundation of creation itself, a single point of order in a world of water. Some say the shape of the Benben inspired the pyramid. So if the pyramid is built to represent that primeval mound, maybe it's also a monument to rebirth. A reminder that, even after a great fall, something can rise again. Okay, this is where things get a little speculative. Some folks, authors, researchers, curious night owls, believe there was an advanced civilization before the Younger Dryas. Maybe not iPhones and skyscrapers advanced, but something more developed than we give them credit for. They point to places like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a site full of massive stone pillars, carved with animals and symbols, dated to around 9,600 BCE. That's right around the end of the Younger Dryas. And it suggests that people back then were organizing, building, and thinking in big symbolic ways. So here's the big what if. What if Egypt, or at least the knowledge behind it, was part of that older world? Maybe not directly, but as a legacy, as a memory passed down from survivors, rebuilt, retold, reinvented. The pyramids, then, might not be the beginning. They might be the echo, a message carved in stone by people who remembered or were told that the world once fell apart and rose again. Think about that. The Great Pyramid standing tall not just as a tomb or a monument, but as a time capsule. A whisper across millennia, we were here, we endured, don't forget. And here we are, thousands of years later, still listening. The Younger Dryas came, and it went. Ice melted, life returned, civilizations rose, fell, and rose again. But some stories stuck, not in books, not in libraries, but in stars, in myths, in stone. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the pyramids were always meant to be. A story that couldn't be washed away. The Great Pyramid of Giza has been standing for over 4,500 years, maybe longer, depending on who you ask. It's watched the stars turn, the Nile flood, empires rise and fall, tourists with fanny packs come and go. And yet, after all this time, we still don't really know what's inside it. Not completely, because here's the thing, the pyramid is hiding something. Now, at first glance, the Great Pyramid doesn't seem too complex. It's basically a big triangle on every side. Right? Wrong. On the outside, sure, it's all straight lines and smooth-ish sides, but the inside is a maze of chambers, shafts, and passageways. There's the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, who wasn't actually a queen, the grand gallery, and a bunch of other tight, awkward spaces where archaeologists have bumped their heads more than a few times. But here's the weird part. For a structure this massive, made from over 2 million stone blocks, there's not much going on inside. At least, not that we can see. Now let's fast forward to the 21st century. Fancy technology, particle physics, robots with names like Jetty. Yes, really. In 2015, a team of scientists launched something called the Scan Pyramids Project. Instead of drilling holes or breaking walls, which, let's be honest, is a terrible way to treat a wonder of the world, they used muon tomography. Sounds like a Star Trek thing, but it's real. Muons are tiny particles that come from cosmic rays. They pass through stone, but they slow down when the stone is thick. So if there's an empty space inside the pyramid, more muons pass through. Basically, they scanned the pyramid using cosmic particles from space. How cool is that? What they found was surprising. Above the Grand Gallery, way up in the core of the pyramid, they detected a massive empty space, around 30 meters long. that's the size of a city bus or a small jet or, a secret royal meeting room for gods. They called it the Big Void. Not very dramatic, I know. Could have gone with the Chamber of Echoes or the Room Time Forgot. But scientists like to keep things boring. Anyway, nobody knows what this void is. Could be a structural cavity. Or it could be something much more interesting. And here's where the theories roll in. Some believe it's an undiscovered ceremonial space, untouched for thousands of years. A room built for the pharaoh's soul, or for the gods, or for something else. Others say it's a balance chamber designed to relieve pressure on the internal structure. And then there are those who think it might contain a time capsule, ancient texts, star maps, devices. Who knows? And no, this isn't Indiana Jones territory. These are legit researchers asking legit questions. Because when you find a giant unknown space inside one of the most mysterious buildings on Earth, it's okay to be a little curious. Over the years, several tiny robots have been sent crawling through the pyramid's shafts, like little scarab spies. One of the most famous was the Jetty robot, which was designed to explore a narrow shaft leading from the Queen's chamber. Found a tiny sealed door at the end, with little copper handles. Behind it, another cavity, and another stone. What's behind that stone? We don't know, and we haven't gone any further. Mostly because Egypt's Antiquities Department is, understandably, careful about letting people drill into their most famous treasure. So the mystery remains. Now, those shafts, they might not be just ventilation. Some align almost perfectly with stars. One points toward Orion's belt, another toward Sirius, another to the northern circumpolar stars, the ones that never set. Ancient Egyptians believed the soul traveled to the stars after death. So maybe these shafts were spiritual launch pads, like cosmic elevators for the soul. Or maybe they were guiding lights for whatever or whoever was inside the pyramid. Now let's pause for a second. It's tempting to think of the Great Pyramid as some kind of ancient machine, filled with hidden rooms and high-tech secrets. And hey, maybe it was. We'll talk about that in a later chapter. But sometimes symbolism is the function. A hidden chamber doesn't have to hold gold or gadgets to be meaningful. Maybe it was built to never be found. A metaphor for the unknowable. A silent message to the future. Kind of like the pyramid itself. A mystery that sits quietly in the sand, waiting for someone to ask the right question. Honestly, we don't know. Could be nothing. Could be everything. That's the magic of it. Sometimes the not knowing is what makes it special. Keeps us wondering. Keeps us imagining. Keeps us humble. Because no matter how much we scan, measure, or probe, there are still places on this earth where secrets are allowed to live. And maybe, just maybe, the Great Pyramid still has stories it's not ready to share. So the next time you see a photo of the Great Pyramid, remember this: there's a room in there, a big one, and no one's ever been inside. You're sitting under a star-filled sky thousands of years ago, somewhere near the Nile. The night is warm. The air smells of sand, spices, and something magical. Your friend leans close and shows you strange symbols carved into a piece of stone. Little pictures of birds, snakes, eyes, and squiggly lines. What do they mean? You ask. Not just words, they say. It's a language, but also a story, a prayer, a secret. Those symbols are called hieroglyphs. You've probably seen them in museums or movies, colorful, intricate pictures decorating walls and temples. But hieroglyphs aren't just an alphabet like the one we use. They're more like a language of symbols, a kind of sacred code. Some symbols stand for sounds, like letters in a word. Others stand for whole ideas, like a drawing of an eye meaning to see or watch. And some are even more mysterious. They could represent spiritual concepts or cosmic forces. It's like Egyptian writing was part art, part magic, part conversation. Here's a cool thing. Ancient Egyptians believed words were powerful, not just because they communicated ideas, but because the sound of a word could affect the world. Think of it like chanting a spell or singing a lullaby. The sound shapes reality. The god Thoth, who we'll meet properly later, was the god of writing, wisdom, and magic. People thought he invented writing, and that writing had the power to keep the universe in balance. So hieroglyphs were more than letters. They were tools, sacred tools. If you look at hieroglyphs closely, you'll notice something fun. The same symbol can have different meanings depending on context. It's like a puzzle. A symbol might mean a bird, or it might stand for the letter A, or it could mean freedom or sky. This made Egyptian writing rich and beautiful, but also tricky. You had to know the secret rules, the keys to read it properly. And that's where priests and scribes came in. In ancient Egypt, scribes were highly respected. They were the ones who learned the complex writing system, often in secret schools. It could take years to master the art of hieroglyphs. And once you did, you became a keeper of knowledge. Scribes didn't just write down everyday things. They recorded prayers, spells, history, and science. They preserved stories of gods, kings, and cosmic order. In a way, they were the original librarians, magicians, and historians rolled into one. Hieroglyphs weren't just for writing stories. They decorated temples and tombs with symbols meant to protect, heal, or transform. For example, the Ankh symbol, a little cross with a loop on top, meant life. You'd see it in the hands of gods, blessing pharaohs or souls passing into the afterlife. Or the scarab beetle, a symbol of rebirth and transformation. These symbols were believed to have real power, like tiny, eternal spells carved in stone. For centuries, the meaning of hieroglyphs was lost. The knowledge faded like a whisper in the desert wind. Then, in 1799, a stone was found near the town of Rosetta. It had the same text written in 3 scripts: Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian script, and hieroglyphs. Because scholars could read Greek, they used it as a key to unlock the ancient language. Thanks to the Rosetta Stone, the silent symbols of Egypt started to speak again. But hieroglyphs aren't just about reading history books. Some believe the Egyptians used their writing as a way to connect with the cosmos, that the shapes, sounds, and meanings were aligned with the stars, planets, and spiritual forces. The language of the gods wasn't just written, it was lived. Every inscription, every carving was a way to participate in the universe's eternal story, because maybe that's what the pyramids and temples were about. Not just stone and sweat and math, but a way to capture knowledge, protect wisdom, and connect us to something bigger. Hieroglyphs remind us that language isn't just for talking. It's for dreaming, for remembering, for keeping the magic alive. So, the next time you see those strange, beautiful symbols carved in stone, remember, you're looking at more than words. You're looking at a language of the soul, a story carved across time. Imagine stepping into a quiet chamber, tucked away deep inside a temple in ancient Egypt. The air smells faintly of incense and old parchment. Shadows dance on the walls, cast by flickering oil lamps. Here, under the watchful eyes of statues and stars, a secret world unfolds, one of wisdom, mystery, and the eternal search for truth. This is the realm of Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and cosmic order, and the mystery schools where knowledge was passed down, quietly, carefully, like a precious flame. Thoth wasn't just any god. He was the keeper of knowledge, the divine scribe of the gods, often shown as a man with the head of an ibis bird, that long, curved beak. That's him. Thoth was believed to have invented writing, mathematics, astronomy, and even magic. He was the cosmic librarian, the recorder of time, the master of balance and order. The ancient Egyptians believed Thoth kept the universe running smoothly, measuring, writing, and maintaining the harmony of Ma'at, the divine balance of truth and justice. Now, these mystery schools weren't your typical schools with classrooms and chalkboards. They were secretive places where select priests and scribes studied everything from astronomy to sacred geometry, philosophy to ritual magic. Think of them like ancient universities, but with an extra layer of hush-hush secrecy. Students learn to read and write hieroglyphs, study the stars, perform rituals, and understand the hidden laws of the universe. Initiations into the mystery schools were quiet, solemn affairs. New students entered dim chambers, where only flickering candles lit the shadows. They were taught that knowledge wasn't just something to collect. It was a way to connect with the cosmos, to understand one's place in the grand order. The mysteries were meant to awaken the soul, to help the initiate journey toward wisdom and spiritual insight. At the heart of it all was the concept of Ma'at, the idea that the universe is balanced, ordered, and just. The mystery schools taught that humans have a role to play in maintaining this balance. Through wisdom, truth, and action, they could help keep the world from falling into chaos. Thoth, as the divine scribe, was the symbol of this cosmic harmony. The priests and scribes who studied under Thoth's guidance weren't just recorders of facts. They were seekers, exploring the nature of reality, the secrets of the stars, and the mysteries of life and death. Their knowledge wasn't meant to be hoarded, but to be shared carefully, respectfully, and at the right time. The mystery schools were places of growth, of transformation, where students learned that wisdom is an endless journey. Though much of what was taught in these schools is lost to us, echoes remain. Ideas about the soul's journey, the balance of life and death, and the connections between earth and sky. Some say that these ancient teachings influenced later philosophies and mysteries, stretching across time and cultures. The flame of Thoth's wisdom flickers still, waiting for those who seek it. Because in this quiet moment, as you listen to these stories, you're stepping into that ancient mystery. You're joining the seekers who looked up at the same stars, wondered the same questions, and felt the same awe. The legacy of Thoth and the mystery schools reminds us that knowledge is more than facts. It's about wonder, connection, and the deep human desire to understand the universe and ourselves. So as you drift toward sleep, know this: the ancient keepers of knowledge still whisper through time, inviting us to keep asking, keep exploring, and keep dreaming. When you look at the Great Pyramid of Giza, what do you see? A giant tomb? A monument to a mighty pharaoh? A giant stone puzzle? Well, it's all of those and maybe a little more. The pyramid's purpose has fascinated explorers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries. And the truth is still wrapped in mystery. The most common story is that the pyramids were built as tombs, grand resting places for pharaohs like Khufu. Inside, they say, the pharaoh's body was laid to rest, surrounded by treasures for the afterlife. But there's a catch. No mummy was ever found inside the Great Pyramid. No treasure chambers bursting with gold. Just empty halls and echoing silence. That's made some folks wonder, was the pyramid really just a tomb? Here's a wild thought that some researchers have tossed around. What if the pyramid was some kind of ancient power plant? Not electricity like we have today, but maybe something we don't fully understand. The pyramid's shape, its precise angles, even the materials used. Some think they were designed to focus or amplify natural energy. Water shafts inside the pyramid, mysterious chambers. Could they have created vibrations or energy flows? We don't know for sure, but it's a fascinating idea that takes us beyond stone and mortar. Some go even further, imagining the pyramid as a kind of ascension machine, a device to help the soul rise to the stars. Remember those alignments with Orion and Sirius from Chapter 6? Maybe the pyramid's true purpose wasn't physical at all. Maybe it was a spiritual gateway, a place where the pharaoh's soul could journey to join the gods in the sky. It's a beautiful thought, isn't it? That a building could help carry a soul on a cosmic trip. Another idea, the pyramid was a giant observatory. Its shafts align with important stars, and its layout mirrors the stars of Orion's belt. Perhaps ancient Egyptians used it to track the heavens, to mark seasons, festivals, and celestial events. A place where stone and star danced together. The truth? The Great Pyramid might have served many purposes. A tomb, temple, a machine, a symbol. Maybe it was all of these things at once. That's the beauty of mystery. It invites us to wonder. Perhaps the pyramid's greatest power wasn't in what it physically did, but what it represented. A connection between earth and sky, life and afterlife, humanity and the cosmos. An eternal symbol of human curiosity, faith, and hope. If you stand near the pyramid today, you might hear the desert wind, soft, timeless, carrying whispers of these secrets. As you listen, let your mind wander among the possibilities. And remember, sometimes the greatest magic lies not in answers, but in the questions we ask. And with that, let your thoughts drift as gently as the desert sands. Imagine a time so long ago, it's called Zep-Tepi, the first time. In ancient Egyptian myth, this was when gods walked the earth. A golden age before humans, before kings, before history as we know it. A time when the world was fresh and perfect, and divine beings shaped the land and sky. Zep-Tepi isn't just a story, it's a whole worldview. The Egyptians believed that before the chaos of history, there was this sacred beginning, a cosmic reset. During Zep-Tepi, gods like Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Seth ruled, teaching humanity how to live, farm, and build. They brought order from chaos. Ma'at. Remember? It was a time of harmony, magic, and divine presence. Some thinkers suggest that Zep-Tepi might be more than myth. Could it be a distant memory of a time before the Younger Dryas cataclysm? A world that was wiped clean and then rebuilt? Maybe the gods were the ancestors of an ancient civilization with knowledge we can barely imagine today. Stories tell how the gods created the rivers, mountains, and deserts, how they laid the foundations of cities and temples, how the very land of Egypt was molded by divine hands. Imagine hearing these stories around a campfire, the stars shining above, the wind carrying the voices of the past. Myths like Zep-Tepi do more than explain the past. They give meaning to the present. They connect people to the land, to the stars, and to each other. In the stories of gods walking the earth, the Egyptians found hope that even after catastrophe, life, order, and knowledge could return. Archaeologists and scientists have found traces of ancient floods, sudden climate changes, and lost settlements. Could these be echoes of the cataclysm the myths hint at? Could the pyramids themselves be monuments not just to pharaohs, but to this ancient divine memory? So tonight, as you close your eyes, picture that golden age. A world where gods and humans touched, where the stars whispered secrets, and where every stone held a story. The story of beginnings and new beginnings. And with that, drift softly into dreams as timeless as the sands. After thousands of years under blazing sun and endless stars, the pyramids of Giza slept quietly, hidden in plain sight. But history had a way of stirring old secrets back to life. Fast forward to the late 18th and early 19th centuries, a time when Europe was swept by curiosity about ancient worlds. Enter Napoleon Bonaparte, marching his army into Egypt in 1798. He wasn't just there for conquest. He brought scholars, scientists, and artists with him. These early explorers stood before the pyramids, awestruck by their size and mystery. For many, it was the first real meeting with one of humanity's greatest puzzles. Napoleon's team documented everything, from hieroglyphs to temple ruins. Soon after, dedicated Egyptologists emerged, devouring scrolls, deciphering symbols, and piecing together stories from long ago. Their work sparked a global fascination, opening the door to understanding ancient Egyptian culture, religion, and engineering. As more pyramids and tombs were uncovered, scholars learned about pharaohs, gods, and daily life. But the Great Pyramid remained elusive. Despite all the research, no one could fully explain how it was built or why. Theories piled up like desert sandstorms. From slave labor to alien technology, from water ramps to hidden knowledge. Today, scientists use cutting-edge technology, like 3D scans, cosmic ray detectors, and drones, to peek inside without touching a single stone. They've discovered hidden voids, mysterious chambers, and new details about the pyramid's structure. Each finding brings fresh questions and awe. The pyramids stand at a crossroads of past and present. Modern explorers walk the same paths as ancient priests and builders. Their discoveries fold time like pages in a book, connecting us with a world so old, yet still alive in stories and stones. Maybe the greatest secret of all is this feeling, the wonder of standing before something vast and ancient. The pyramids remind us that human curiosity never dies, that across millennia, people have dreamed, built, and reached for the stars. So as you settle into sleep, imagine joining those early explorers. Feel the quiet thrill of uncovering secrets, and know that, just like them, you're part of this timeless story, a story that's still unfolding beneath the whispering sands. And with that, let your mind wander gently toward dreams. As we gaze once more upon the pyramids, those silent giants of stone, it's easy to get lost in their mystery. But beyond their walls of limestone and granite, there's a deeper story, one about us. The pyramids aren't just buildings. They're monuments to human spirit, to endurance, to curiosity, and to hope. Think about it, these structures have stood for thousands of years. Through floods, droughts, wars, and desert storms, they've witnessed the rise and fall of empires. In their stillness, they reflect the passage of time itself. The ancient Egyptians lived through cataclysms, the Younger Dryas event, floods, and upheaval. Yet they rebuilt, innovated, and thrived. The pyramids stand as testaments to resilience, that no matter how dark the night, dawn eventually comes. From Thoth's mystery schools to modern scientists scanning stone chambers, the quest to understand never ends. The pyramids remind us to keep asking questions, to never settle for easy answers, because knowledge is a journey, not a destination. Look around today. The same curiosity that built those pyramids fuels innovation, art, and exploration. From the stars above to the oceans below, humans keep reaching for the unknown. The pyramids connect us to the past and future. They remind us that we're part of a bigger story, one where civilizations rise and fall, but human spirit endures. Perhaps the greatest lesson is hope, that even after disaster, loss, or change, we can rebuild. We can create something lasting, something that whispers stories to those who come after us. So as you close your eyes tonight, remember the pyramids, not just as ancient monuments, but as symbols of what it means to be human, enduring, curious, and forever hopeful. May this thought carry you gently into your dreams. Here we are again, beneath the vast Egyptian sky, where the pyramids stand like timeless sentinels. Bathed in moonlight, their silent stones seem to breathe stories carried on the desert breeze. Look up. The stars scatter like diamonds across velvet. The same stars that watched over builders and priests, kings and commoners, centuries ago. Orion, Sirius, the Milky Way, eternal companions to the pyramids below. Their light has traveled millennia, touching these stones and now, reaching you. The desert sand is never truly silent. It whispers in the wind. It remembers every footstep, every secret told beneath the night sky. The pyramids are the echoes of those whispers, stories carved in stone, speaking across time. As you lie down tonight, imagine time folding gently around you. Past, present, and future blending into a peaceful stillness. The great cycles of history rise and fall, creation and rest, calming your mind. Like the desert after a storm, everything finds its quiet place. The pyramids teach us about endurance, about human dreams reaching beyond the stars, about the power of mystery to inspire wonder, and about peace, the kind that comes from accepting the unknown. Now, as your breath slows and your eyes grow heavy, let these ancient stones cradle your thoughts. Feel the cool desert night wrap around you like a soft blanket. Let your worries fade into the eternal silence. If you enjoyed this journey through time, remember, many more stories await. Stories of lost cities beneath the waves, of forgotten worlds and timeless mysteries. Our next adventure will take you deep beneath the ocean, to the legend of Atlantis reimagined. But for now, rest. Good night, traveler. May your dreams be as endless as the sands.